No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, we're going to be going over part 4 in this series. We're talking about cognitive distortions and how they affect leaders in the workplace. If you want to go back a few Mondays and start listening, it's a really cool kind of series about the things that we can find ourselves doing that lead us to make poor decisions that impact our relationships with others. And we've been saying since the beginning, there's really no way to stop these things from happening. It's more along the lines of how do you recognize them when they're happening within yourself so that you can take steps to kind of curtail them, or at the very least, make sure that you're not making decisions that are rooted in them, because they are distortions. They are a skewing of reality in some way that will lead you, if you accept them as reality, will lead you down a path of making a decision in the wrong way that could hurt a relationship you have with a peer or a someone who reports up through you. And so on this episode, we're going to be going over 3 more of them. The first one we're going to go over is blaming, and blaming refers to if you think others are responsible for how you feel, both positively or negatively, you made me feel bad. This is kind of like the definition of this cognitive distortion. If you believe that others are in control of how you feel, and I've said for a long time, when it comes to words only, not when it comes to actions, but when it comes to words, that you are nobody's victim unless you give your permission. That's an Eleanor Roosevelt quote from a long time ago, and it's something that I believe in almost every circumstance when it comes to words. Meaning, if someone whose opinion shouldn't matter starts to matter, then you should be able to go through life without letting those things get to you. Now, if it's a person whose opinion should matter, a spouse or a parent, a sibling, that's a little bit different. But we're talking about how these work in the workplace, and so I think there should be a little bit more of a disconnect between the two, and you shouldn't kind of let other people make you feel bad about yourself when their opinion shouldn't matter as much.
Yeah, this one's tough because I think overall, when we think about just society this day and age and social media and so much around validation and those types of behaviors, and then you enter the workplace and then you say, well, if my boss tells me something and it and it doesn't feel good about what they're saying, then how can I kind of disconnect that from my emotions, right? It's a tough thing.
Especially when we don't have a separation between work and personal life anymore. You're supposed to bring your full self to work. You're supposed to have a personal relationship with your coworkers.
Right. And I think the underlying thing here, for me, as far as what I hear in the blaming piece, is like, it's not about that you can't have feelings or you can't feel a certain way about something that was said. It's a matter of kind of working through that and not allowing that to define who you are, not holding on to these things and believing what they say to be 100% true about you, especially if there's more context that's there. So again, I think that this is one of those situations where if you're getting things like, I imagine if you're leading people and you want to provide somebody with feedback, or if you get some type of feedback from someone, that all of a sudden you feel like, oh my God, like how, I'm doing my best here. I'm doing everything I can. How can you, think about me this way? Or how can you say that I'm not? And it's like, there's, without a good relationship, without a good, healthy, trusting relationship with a leader, that can feel that way. It can very much feel like they're validating maybe the parts of you that you're, thinking through and working on. But I think that it's being conscious of that. It's kind of like, you can call it like getting thicker skin over time or whatever you want to call it. But what it comes down to is realizing at some point in your life that you're going to have people that are going to disagree with you. You're going to have people that don't work the same way that you work. You're going to have people that have limited ability to understand your vision or your approach, and they're going to say things sometimes that that you may take in for a moment and feel a certain way about, but moving beyond that and then just kind of realizing that you have the full control over how you feel and you're able to move forward through these things and carry on, I think it's something that's really, really important to work through. And I'm not saying that anybody is there. Like there are 100% times when, as long as I've done this and as long as I've led people, that somebody will say something, again, that I think is somebody that I have respect for, somebody that I work with, that will make me feel a certain way. And it's not a matter of not being able to feel that way. It is a matter, though, of sitting back and thinking about it and then realizing, like, well, no, like that's actually not who I am. That's not how I show up. That's not my body of work. That's not my intent. And so I'm not going to let that bother me because they don't have the full sense of who I am or how I do my work.
Right. I think that's spot on, because if someone were to say something about who they think you are as a person, or something that implies that that is triggering, basically, that makes you feel a certain way, there's really only one of three reactions you could have to that. Either that's ridiculous, meaning you are so confident that that's not who you are, that there's no way that people see you that way, and if someone is saying that, they are either just they're rooting it in a single interaction, or they are making it up, or they're being kind of exaggerating. Like, you're so confident about that it doesn't even, it's like you're bulletproof to it, kind of thing. It doesn't impact you. That's one reaction. Number two, you react in a triggering way because it is something that you are really worried about coming off as, because you know it to be true about yourself. Or I think the most common thing, and this is kind of falls in the middle of those two, is it is something that you know to be true about yourself, and you're working really hard on not being that way, and you feel like you've come a long way. You feel like you've made steps to do this the right way over time, and you feel like you've gotten into a rhythm with it, and then someone will say something that leads you to believe that they think that this is who you are, and it goes right back to the, oh my gosh, is this how the world sees me? Is this who I am? Have all this hard work I've done to not be this way, is it for nothing? Am I back where I started? And that can be probably maybe the most triggering of all three of those, especially when it comes to a leader, when you know that your influence is necessary in order to drive team results and team cohesion. You don't want to be seen certain ways, and if you hear these things and it's making you feel a certain way, again, that kind of like feeling bad about it in the moment, it becomes imperative to kind of look through your history with that thing, to kind of decide very quickly which of those three things it is. Are you bulletproof to it because you know this is not the case, and you can look through your history and think this is ridiculous? Or is it something that they've pulled your head out of the sand and you're forced to look at yourself in the mirror, and this is something you don't want to know about yourself, but it's true? Or is it something you're trying to move through, again, which I think is the most common in terms of that triggering feeling? I know in my personal life, when I feel like someone has control over my emotional reaction to something, it's because it's something that I'm really trying hard not to do, and have been trying hard for a long time, and it puts me in a situation where I feel like, oh my gosh, am I failing at trying to get better at this? The next one I want to talk about is this concept of shoulds. Should statements are kind of they're these all or nothing things. Like, this is the way the world should work, and I believe it to be, and we can group shouldn'ts in there also. Should and shouldn't. Look at these as the same thing. Everybody should do this. You should come to work on time every day, or you shouldn't do whatever it is. This is how the world should work, and you believe that to be true based on your own experience. And when things don't go that way, you react negatively in the moment to people who don't kind of uphold your belief that this is the way the world should work.
Yeah, this is one of the ones that I think I see quite often. With just kind of like, and I always sum it up as like, you can't kind of project your own personal expectations onto other people. Right. Like, it's not fair to them. It's not fair to you.
I'm terrible at this.
Right. Right. It's a working session now, right?
Yes.
Tell me more, Chris, about your childhood. It's a tough thing, and it happens. And I think that I understand it, because I think over time, our experiences in life, the way that we see things, and again, our own personal elements of accountability, when we kind of have defined for ourselves what it means to be a good person, what it means to be a good partner, a good parent, a good worker. We kind of have these rule sets that we've created for ourselves, and then we unintentionally sometimes box people into those same rule sets of like, well, this is how it should be, right? And like, I'm just as guilty as you are, right? Because I feel when it comes to like people and their careers and the work they should do and how they should get promoted, like I have these same types of things. And it can be limiting to a degree when it comes to kind of we talk about like the growth mindset or just being open to different ways of doing things. I think when it becomes tougher is when people have when people let themselves down, when people kind of feel like I should be here by now, I should have gotten this job or this title, I should have accomplished this thing, and they haven't yet, and then it just spirals down into just like beating themselves up and like, what am I even doing here? Is this the right thing? Like, that's where I think it gets really, really tough. I think it's easier when it's kind of the should of others, and I can sit down and say like, well, let's talk through that. Let's talk about that, and why is that the case? And then should I be able to impose my shoulds upon you? And they're like, no. I'm like, perfect. Then you shouldn't do that to other people. But when it comes to the personal shoulds, I think this is one as a leader that for ourselves, but also for our people, we need to be conscious of, because these can be ones that are really, really hard to recover from when it comes to people and their careers and the goals that they have.
Yeah, where this is rooted in, when you're talking about the shoulds that apply to yourself, is it is a comparative thing to other people. Meaning, how do you know you should be at a certain place by a certain time? How do you know you should do things a certain way? If by the only way you know that, or I say no in air quotes here because you don't know. But in your mind, when you're saying I should be doing this by now, I should be making my bed every day, I should be going to the gym every day, I should be at a director level by the time I'm 45. I should be, whatever you want to say, whatever the should is. It's rooted in your experience, meaning you've seen others do this who are in a place in their life that you desire to be. It's comparative. And there's no way to compare yourself to other people unless you and them have literally the exact same life. You have the exact same upbringing, the exact same experience, the exact same privileges and disadvantages, the exact same whatever you want it to be. Everybody's life is a sum of whatever their experiences are, and to compare yourself to somebody else to the point where it makes you start to feel bad about where you are, as opposed to just focusing on getting better. I mean, there's luck. There's luck involved in a lot, So this is where people get into trouble, is when it gets to the point where they start feeling bad about themselves, and they can spiral. They can get down to the point where they stop making changes or decisions or steps in order to get where they want to be, because they're focused on why they're not already there to begin with. And I think it's again, yes, it's a problem when you apply it to other people, but I think it's an even bigger problem when you apply it to yourself. The last one that I want to go over is this concept of emotional reasoning. This is really similar to the shoulds. It's a should statement kind of, but it's rooted in not how you believe the world should work or how people should work, but rather in how something makes you feel. So I feel this way about a situation, therefore it must be true. So, if you don't feel like you belong in a room with, a particular set of coworkers, then you must not belong there. You feel like you don't belong, therefore you shouldn't be there. As opposed to kind of taking in the entirety of the situation. You kind of have this, kind of emotional reaction to something initially, and that leads you to make poor decisions regarding that situation, as opposed to, kind of taking a step back and really assessing the entirety of the situation.
Yeah, and this is one of those that pop up quite often, I think, when you have to give somebody or you have to receive negative specific feedback.
Yes.
Right? Like, these are the times when somebody's telling you about something that you did and how, like, that's not the way to do it, or it didn't work, or it was unacceptable, or it was a failure, like whatever it might be. And you're taking that as, this person hates you. This person thinks that you're no good. This person wants to fire you. Like, those are those times when it's not just the emotional reaction to like, okay, Maybe you did screw something up. Maybe you didn't do it the right way. Maybe you did make a mistake, and you're going to have that emotion that goes along with that. But then assigning that to the person to then say like, well, that just means that they did this or they that. And I hear that. I've had conversations with team members over the years where it's like, well, I think that leader just hates me. And it's like, well, what do you mean? Why would they hate you? Well, when this or that happened, or when when I wasn't doing what I was supposed to be doing, and they came up to me and they were just like, how come I keep on having to have this conversation with you? You continue to not do what you do. Clearly, they don't like me. And it's like, well, no, like, not necessarily at all. Like, let's pull back a little bit. Like, let's talk about this. Am I saying that there are times when people don't like each other? Like, people definitely don't like each other. That does happen, and that happens to leaders, and it happens from leaders, and it happens amongst leaders. Like, there are plenty of times that people just do not get along, and there are reasons for that. I'm just saying, in this moment here, in this context of this cognitive distortion, it's when you start to assign like the totality of somebody's feelings as fact because of something that was done that might have made you triggered, or might have made you emotional. That just because that happened doesn't necessarily mean that is the fact. That's why it's coming from the person this way. And so that's just something to consider and to think about. And again, it makes it really difficult to build trusting relationships if there's not an element of kind of this emotional maturity to number one, have some intent, have some belief that somebody's intent is not to to bring you harm or to make you mad. They may have facts that you don't like, but like that's not their intent. And it's important to give them some grace in case they do say something wrong or to make you upset. Again, if it was not intentional, like it really requires kind of this open idea of like, well, like, yeah, Chris, you said that, like, that doesn't make me feel good, or that really made me mad. But I don't think that you did that because you hate me or because you think that I'm a piece of crap or whatever. Like, that's not the case. Like, but let's talk through that to better understand what was going on there. I think that's important.
Or that they were doing it to you to begin with. I mean, I think this is where a lot of things happen. Where this kind of rears its head here. If you assess that, in a situation you react emotionally because someone says something, you conclude that they are treating you poorly. Maybe they didn't even say it to you. Maybe it wasn't even about you. So there's some ego in here too. This is about how do you take it and what do you let it do to yourself in the moment? Do you internalize that as that they were actually talking to you directly, and you allow that to change the way you feel and go about through your day? Or do you dismiss it as if they are uneducated, if they say something they shouldn't have said, then dismiss it as that. They shouldn't have said that, but that's not going to impact the way I feel about myself because I know my own worth, I know my own value.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, for this episode's 1 Minute Hack, here's what I want you to do. Get out your pen and paper, and I want you to write down 10 statements about how you believe people should work in the workplace. 10 should or shouldn't statements about how you believe people should or shouldn't kind of approach work or come to work or be at work. An example could be people should come to work on time, right? So write down 10 of those statements. And then I want you to pick them apart yourself. Go through all 10 statements, and I want you to legitimately look at them objectively and come up with reasons, a few for each one, about why something wouldn't happen that way that has nothing to do with the character or work ethic or overall kind of worth of the person. Come up with a few of those for each one. This exercise will kind of help you realize in the moment that there are very few things in life that are as black and white as being able to say this is how the world should or shouldn't work. It might be that way for yourself. It might be that way for your experience, but it isn't necessarily the same for the world as a whole or your workplace as a whole. The more you can do this, the more you can give other people and yourself grace when they don't act the way that you believe they should or shouldn't act.
Yeah, I think it's a great 1 minute hack, and it's I think just taking the time to consider, to kind of center yourself, to really make sure that, again, like we're all going to get caught up in our emotions. It's going to happen no matter what. But thinking about what do you do in those moments, thinking about how you see the work, how you see yourself, that element of self-awareness and self-reflection, I think are just absolutely key to doing the best to prepare yourself for those moments that you know what's going to happen. And I think that we do it many times when you know if you're going to walk into a conversation that, you may know how that peer or that coworker or that employee is going to react, and you may be expecting them to react negatively or something like that. And you're kind of prepared mentally for the conversation. You know what you're going to say. Same thing in personal relationships. You kind of think through like, hey, here's what I really want to talk about. Here's what I want to make sure that I land my point, or that I don't get caught up in these types of things. Like that same level of preparation, I think, is so important in the context of these cognitive distortions, because like that's what's going to make it easier, not the easiest, and not without any type of emotion, but it will make it easier to navigate these situations if you are prepared and taking the time to prepare.
Right. I've said it for a long time, and I believe it to this day. You can't help the way you feel about a certain situation. You can only help how you act in response to those feelings. And this isn't about stopping the way you feel about a situation. This is about making sure that you don't react in a way that hurts your relationship with your coworkers. It's about making sure that you understand that just because you feel a certain way about something, it doesn't mean that everybody else in the room is going to feel the same way you do. It doesn't mean that everybody should act the same way that you act. It means that if you value the relationship, if you're a leader of people and you value your relationship with them, even if for no more than you want to make sure they continue to be productive because that impacts your own success at work, then reacting in ways that imply that you don't have the ability to do this is not going to help your career. It's only going to hurt it.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.